It's October 30th, 1938. Millions of families all over the United States settle in around the radio for their regular evening entertainment. Cold glasses of Ovaltine gripped in their unassuming mitts. The broadcast begins.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. From the Meridian Room in the Park Plaza in New York City, we bring you the music of Ramon Raquello and his orchestra. With a touch of the Spanish, Ramon Raquello leads off with La Comparsita.
And then, without warning, an interruption. Some kind of emergency bulletin.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving towards the Earth with enormous velocity. Professor Pearson of the observatory at Princeton confirms Farrell's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote. We now return you to the music of Ramon Raquello playing for you in the Meridian Room of the Park Plaza Hotel situated in downtown New York.
They bring the concert back, but listeners are nervous. Mothers pull their children a little closer. Fathers take a moment to pull back a corner of the living room curtains and peer up into the sky. Unsettled, they try to shrug it off and continue enjoying the dulcet tones drifting into their homes. And then another interruption, this time more concerning.
Ladies and gentlemen, following on the news given in our bulletin a moment ago, the Government Meteorological Bureau has requested the large observatories of the country to keep an astronomical watch on any further disturbances occurring on the planet Mars.
They explain to the audience that they're going to bring in an expert astronomer from Princeton University on the air to discuss these strange disturbances in the sky. And after a moment more of music, here he is, Professor Pearson, to explain what he's seeing as he looks through his telescope at Mars. There seem to be some explosions of some sort, but Mars is 40 million miles away, so we're safe enough, the interview concludes. Music returns, but then another interruption, this one even more chilling than the others.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is the latest bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News, Toronto, Canada. Professor Morse of McGill University reports observing a total of 3 explosions on the planet Mars between the hours of 7:45 p.m. and 9:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This confirms earlier reports received from American observatories. Now, nearer home comes a special announcement from Trenton, New Jersey. It is reported that at 8:50 p.m., a huge flaming object believed to be a meteorite fell on a farm in the neighborhood of Grover's Mill, New Jersey, 22 miles from Trenton. The flash in the sky was visible within a radius of several hundred miles, and the noise of the impact was heard as far north as Elizabeth. We have dispatched a special mobile unit to the scene and will have our commentator, Carl Phillips, give you a word description as soon as he can reach there from Princeton. In the meantime, we take you to the Hotel Martinet in Brooklyn, where Bobby Millett and his orchestra are offering a program of dance music.
No one's listening to the music anymore, only waiting for the next bulletin. And it comes soon enough. Carl Phillips reporting alongside Dr. Pearson at the scene.
Well, I hardly know where to begin to paint for you a word picture of the strange scene before my eyes, like something out of a modern Arabian Nights. Well, I just got here. I haven't had a chance to look around yet. I guess that's it. I guess that's the thing. Directly in front of me, half buried in a vast pit. Must have struck with terrific force. The ground is covered with splinters of a tree it must have struck on its way down. What can I see of the object itself? Doesn't look very much like a meteor, at least not the meteors I've seen. It looks more like a huge cylinder.
The object is some 40 meters in diameter, they say. The farmer who owns the land upon which it fell gives his report of the incident, and then chaos begins to break out at the scene. Something's happening. People are yelling, some telling others to get back. And Carl Phillips describes something truly horrific unfolding before him.
Good heavens! Something's wriggling out of the shadow like a grey snake. Now it's another one and another. They look like tentacles to me. There, I can see the thing's body. It's large as a bear, and it glistens like wet leather. But that face, ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. The eyes are black and gleam like a serpent. The mouth is V-shaped with saliva dripping from its rimless lips that seem to quiver and pulsate. The monster, or whatever it is, can hardly move. It seems weighed down by possibly gravity or something. The thing's raising up. The crowd falls back now. They've seen plenty. This is the most extraordinary experience. I can't find words. I'll pull this microphone with me as I talk. I'll have to stop the description until I can take a new position. Hold on, will you, please? I'll be right back in a minute.
Piano plays. Women and children begin to softly weep in their homes.
A humped shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror, and it leaps right at the advancing men, strikes them head on. Good Lord, they're turning into flame. Now the whole field's caught fire. The woods, the barns, the gas tanks of automobiles, it's spreading everywhere. It's coming this way, about 20 yards to my right.
The transmission cuts out. When next it resumes, listeners are informed that 40 people are dead in that field, including 6 state troopers. Several counties in New Jersey are being put under martial law as the military begins its operation to determine and neutralize the threat. As the broadcast continues, America's thrown into panic. People take to the streets, screaming, crying, gathering in city centers with other fearful citizens watching the sky. Police stations are flooded with calls, as is the radio station airing this horrifying news. Swept up in the horror of it all, a man drops dead of a heart attack. Others take their own lives by leaping from buildings in order to avoid a crueler fate at the hands of the alien invaders. Hospitals are flooded with patients needing treatment for shock. On this Halloween Eve in 1938, chaos erupts over a simple fictional broadcast created by 28-year-old media genius Orson Welles and his Mercury Theater. Let me do that again. Chaos erupts over a simple fictional broadcast created by 23-year-old media genius Orson Welles and his Mercury Theater. Or at least that's the story we've all been told.
That's very much the story as I understand it. I'm back now, by the way. I'm out of character. I'm back.
Out of character. It's so good to see you again, Mark. And excellent work, by the way.
Thank you.
That.
Did you like that? Good.
I
good,
did.
good,
I
good,
mean,
good.
for all of you at home, I asked Mark to give me like an old-timey Welsh broadcaster because I've never heard like an old-timey Welsh guy before.
Nor have I.
I think you
is evident.
I feel like you nailed it. I feel really good about it.
Good. But yeah, so that's exactly how it went down, surely.
Right. Yeah, surely that's a story. No, Marco, today I'm going to bust that right open and explain to you why the myth of the War of the Worlds panic broadcast is just that. A myth.
You sure love to bust a thing wide open, don't you?
I can't tell if you're just talking about my general like of myth busting or if you were trying to insinuate something about me, but either way you're probably right.
The former, very much the former.
Thank you. But yes, this is a myth so heavily circulated that nearly every adult in America knows the story and would happily tell it to you without questioning. Of course, those silly old-timey people were tricked into thinking it was real. How could they know better? Like those adorable
idiots,
doofuses
right?
who jumped out of the way of the train the first time they saw a film in the cinema. People back then were so naive.
Innocent, simple people.
Yes, right? But just simpler times, you know? Or so the story goes. In point of fact, Mark, there is no evidence that anything of the sort happened that night. And in reality...
Come on. Where does a very specific, strange rumor like that come from? Who started something like that?
We'll talk about that. We will absolutely talk about how that happened. But also, don't worry, I will. I'm going to bring it around and end it with a bang, though. So
right,
bear with me as I destroy this for you and tell you how this came to pass. All right.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. So like I said, there's no evidence anything like this happened, and everything that we do know works against it, from the show's listenership to the framing of the broadcast to the hospital records and the call logs at the time. And to be fair, we can't totally blame people for having bought in because a credulous and, let's face it, sensationalist media like the one Welles would go on to depict in the unimpeachable classic Citizen Kane spread the lie that audiences en masse believe that radio broadcast to be real. The New York Times, the Boston Globe, the Washington Post, and so on ran stories about how the broadcast stirred terror and terrified the nation. Let's get one thing straight out the gate here. The nation was not listening. How do we know that? Well, a poll was conducted that very night over the telephone in which 5,000 households were asked what program they were listening to. A whopping 2% of respondents said that they had tuned into some sort of radio play or mentioned War of the Worlds by name.
I see. Okay.
2% said they listened to some sort of radio play. May not even have been War of the Worlds.
Yeah, I wasn't really listening.
Right? Like, we don't know if that was for sure what it was. So only 2% even in the ballpark of having watched or listened to War of the Worlds. In many markets, War of the Worlds wasn't even airing, as the CBS affiliates were carrying local shows instead. For example,
You've
Boston's
scotched. This one is
WEEI.
scotched. Scotched it.
It's scotched?
Scotched. You've scotched this particular story. You
what
know that
does
one,
this
surely.
mean? No, what does scotched mean?
If I come at you with some kind of story, some kind of event, some kind of sequence of events that I've represented, if you've taken that down, you've scotched it, mate. Nah, I'm gonna scotch that one. You've all heard the story. Let me scotch this here and now with the application of facts.
And I've already done it out the gate, right?
Yep, it's scotched.
The end. Let's start the podcast. No. Well, let me go on and further scotch this for you. So like I said, War of the Worlds wasn't carried in many of CBS's affiliates throughout the country because there were local things that preempted it. And everywhere else, well, homie was up against Edgar Bergen, one of the most popular entertainers of the time. Yeah. Who hosted his
catchphrase, yeah?
What's that?
Ed Bergen's catchphrase.
What was his catchphrase?
I'm Big Ed, motherfucker!
That sounds right. It was coming out of his little ventriloquist dummy. Yeah, that's facts. Not gonna scotch that. So he was hosting his regular weekly comedy variety show, the Chase and Sanborn Hour, at the same time. So while plenty of people would later swear that they were totally listening that day, we know for a fact that most of them absolutely weren't. A niche Halloween broadcast wasn't pulling anyone away from their regular favorite show. For those who were listening, chances are they weren't caught unaware by what they heard. Because, you see, there was not one, but two warnings, both before and in the middle of the show, that this was a radio drama and not an actual news broadcast of a real thing that was happening. CBS recognized that there was, of course, a risk that people might tune in and think something was genuinely amiss, as the broadcast had taken inspiration from actual bulletins like the one that played when the Hindenburg went down, for example. So they nipped that in the bud outright.
Remind me again what year we're in here?
38.
So there'd be still some survivors of that around?
Of the Hindenburg?
No. of the War of the Worlds broadcast. We can get some firsthand.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Primary evidence.
That's the funny thing about this whole story, is that, like, firsthand accounts are super unreliable because people lied.
Sure.
So people have been claiming for, the past 90 years or whatever, 80 years, that they listened to this broadcast that we know for a fact had a tiny listenership. So yeah, I even read, like, I think it was in Smithsonian. No, maybe it was National Geographic. Anyway, I was reading one article that started with a guy who was saying that, like, he was like, I was in my car and I heard it, and I knew it was a hoax when I got to my girlfriend's house, and her sister was quaking because she thought it was real or whatever. And I'm like,
just lies, just horse shit.
To me, that is total bullshit. That absolutely sounds like the story you make up afterwards, right? Like,
yes, when the news are interviewing you.
Yeah, right. And it's so funny. And the guy at the time, so that article was in 2005 and he was 92 at the time. So that guy is certainly dead now. But the thing about this is that, like, people didn't really start challenging this narrative until, like, maybe a decade or so ago.
Because
And
it's quite a
then,
fun one, isn't it? It's quite a fun narrative to have around.
sure, yeah. Well, and it's one of those ones like kind of like when we talked about like the bystander effect, right? And Kitty Genovese, where
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
sure.
we take it to say something about people, right?
Yeah.
And so like you can use this for so many things, whether you're talking about like fake news, whether you're talking about like, the gullibility of the masses, like, media literacy, whatever. This is a great stand-in for a lot of things that we think about people and the psychology of people. That's, really what it comes down to is like it's wrong. The only thing it tells
Mm,
you is how susceptible we are to like myth being propagated by trusted news sources more than anything else.
yes.
So yeah,
Do
like
you have a
it's
do you have a kind of a is there a way to trace exactly how it grew and grew and got passed down and passed on?
yeah, and I'm about to get into that, but I think one of the things that is interesting, what I was trying to get to and then got distracted though, was that like when you look at articles like from like 2005 and before, um, even some more recent than that. Apparently, Radiolab did an episode on this in like 2018, and the American Experience docuseries on PBS around the same time did a documentary on this. And still, you find all the stuff that takes it completely seriously, that says like, oh, this
Mm.
happened. And the PBS doc eventually added a line to the end of it that's like, some people think that this was
Oh, right. So up
overblown.
until 2018, there were still documentaries being made about this event as though it was
Yes,
something that
as if it
happened.
actually happened. I mean, still people talk about this like this happened. This is
So who
like
are
I said,
you
like the
then? Sorry.
bystander
What are
effect.
your credentials to turn up and say that it didn't?
So actual historians
Right.
then researched all of this stuff and looked into like finding that thing that said how many people, that survey that said how many people
Okay.
were watching
Okay.
this,
Okay.
checking the call logs and things like that, which people were doing at the time, by the way. Let's be clear. People were incredulous about this at the time because, the newspapers are saying, there's all these people panic and stuff like that. And they're like, that's weird. Nobody around me seemed to be panicked. Like you could
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
look
Yeah. Yeah.
around you and go like, this feels like it didn't happen. So researchers have been able to look back at what people thought and how people responded at the time in
Hmm.
order to go, yeah, this was not a real thing.
Bullshit. Doesn't even ring
Yes.
remotely true.
Right, exactly. And like even like I said, like just the obvious things, right? Like there was a warning before this started that this is fake. And then there's a
I
warning in
don't
the middle that this is
I don't
fake.
seem to remember if there was a warning before Ghostwatch, for example, which is the closest
Right.
parallel that actually happened that I can think of. And I know Ghostwatch
Right, yeah,
happened because I
totally.
was there.
Yes.
Um, but
That plenty of people have memories of watching, yeah.
what I don't remember was any kind of warning at the start.
Well, and I think there's a key difference, and we're jumping the gun a little bit. We'll come back around to it, but I
Of
think one
course.
of the key differences here is that Ghostwatch was not telling the audience that something was like going to happen to them, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
they
true.
weren't
That's true.
like,
That's true.
there's a herd, an army of
Imminent
ghosts coming to
disaster.
all
Yeah,
of
yeah,
your
yeah.
homes,
Mm.
pipes is in your pipes. Like that wasn't
Yep.
what happened.
Yo, hey,
So
yo.
they,
Are
they,
you
yeah,
aware of Craig Charles? Yes. Are you aware of
yeah, of
his
course.
cultural footprint outside of Red Dwarf and Radio Six
Oh,
Music and Ghostwatch?
no, my family is just really into Red Dwarf.
Okay. Remind me to talk to you about Craig Charles maybe a bit later on
Okay.
in this episode. Okay.
I feel good about that. Just please don't like ruin him for me because like I want like one thing left from that. It's not like, oh,
I think
he's a
he's
total
okay
asshole.
now.
Okay.
He seems
Oh,
all right
okay.
now.
Okay. Fair
Yeah.
enough. Fair enough. I'll take that. But anyways, so CBS puts the warnings in to keep people from panicking about anything. It's worth noting, too, that while people of the 1930s may not have been as tech savvy as your average 21st century
Yep,
digital
yep,
boy,
yep, yep, yep.
they weren't fucking stupid. They didn't just accept that there were suddenly aliens invading the Earth. Like, if you turned on the TV right
Yeah, that's a
now,
great point. That's a
right?
great
If you
point.
turned on the TV right now and you saw a news bulletin about space aliens, what would you assume you had just turned on?
A work of fiction.
Yeah, right? You'd be like,
Yeah,
oh, I've turned on a science fiction television show.
yeah, sure, sure,
You
sure.
wouldn't be like, oh my God, we're being invaded right now,
Mm.
right?
Or at least I'd
Uh,
change the channel, or maybe
yeah,
try and
like at
get
least you'd check, right?
a second opinion.
If you change the channel and Edgar Bergen is still, what's his catchphrase?
It's big head,
Right?
motherfuckers.
If he's still doing that,
There's fucking aliens out there, bro.
you're probably fine. So, same for the
Big
folks at the
head's
time.
looking out the window and he doesn't fucking like what he's seeing out there.
So horrifying. The nice man with a puppet. Candace Bergen's dad. Uh,
Fucking
Although I think actually he was like
tentacles.
not a good dad. But anyway,
Yeah.
there are some reports of people having been concerned because they thought at first that the broadcast had something to do with a German invasion, which makes
Oh,
sense
yeah,
at
okay.
that point. But once they realized that like it was about tentacled monsters from Mars, they were like, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay, it's a radio play. Got it." Not to mention that the novel War of the Worlds came out in 1898. So it wasn't like they were adapting some previously unheard of source material. Certainly, there'd be a contingent of people listening who went, I see what they did there. Especially because, again, it was the day before Halloween. Spooky things airing around the
Yeah,
holiday
yeah, 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 yeah.
absolutely makes sense. And according to Smithsonian Magazine, the program Mercury Theater on the Air had already been running for 17 weeks before the War of
Mm.
the Worlds broadcast. So people tuning in were probably tuning in specifically to listen to that show anyway. So the radio station did indeed report an influx of calls that night, but they weren't about people thinking that Martians had seriously fucked up New Jersey.
Mm.
Some callers were angry about the content of this broadcast, and that still happens. There are entire organizations built around being mad at what's on TV and what's in movies and what's in music. The station had just broadcast a horror show with terrifying aliens and mass death.
Yep.
You think the moms who'd made the mistake of settling in to listen with their now traumatized 5-year-olds didn't call the station and give them a piece of their minds about this? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, what is fascinating to me, the whole thing, or the event or the lack of the event, then is
mm-hmm,
fascinating to me. But more than anything, it's how can something that never happened take such a tenacious root
right.
in the cultural history of a culture.
Yes. And I will get to that. Like I said, it's the newspapers, but there's a reason
Mm.
behind what happened here. So yeah, they got complaints about this, but also the station received a bunch of calls to congratulate them on the broadcast because people loved it and they wanted more of this stuff like that. So they called into the station to say so. So yeah, they did get an influx of calls, but not about aliens.
No.
In a 1940 survey by Princeton's Hadley Cantrill, which already offered a listener number estimation over 100% higher than any other known measure of its audience, when people were asked about how the show had made them feel, many used words such as excited, frightened, and disturbed, which were then, according to the Telegraph, conflated with panic, which is like if someone went to see A Quiet Place and was like, that scared me. And the evening news was like, panicked Americans think blind monsters are rampaging through the city eating people who make sounds. Like,
Exactly what it is, isn't it? Yeah.
huge leap,
Yeah.
gigantic leap. And to your point, it is also like if newspapers and movies were in direct competition with each other, so the newspapers had ulterior motives to making the movies look bad. While reports that some 12,500 articles had been printed about the panic within a month were hugely exaggerated, and the story was in and out of the news within a day or two, the articles that did run largely
Mm.
condemned radio as an irresponsible medium that presented hoaxes as if they were fact. The radio was pulling advertisers away from the newspaper. So it was in the newspaper industry's best interest to convince those advertisers that they were staking their reputation on a medium that could destabilize the country with one errant
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
broadcast.
yeah, 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 yeah. Mm.
Yeah, so this didn't happen simply because they wanted
Fascinating.
a sensationalist headline, but because they
Mm.
saw an opportunity here. Like,
Stick it to The
Right.
competition. Very nice.
Exactly that. Maybe we can pull some advertisers back. Maybe advertisers would be too scared to put their stuff on the radio and be like,
Mm.
newspapers are safe. Meanwhile, hospitals had treated no shock, had taken in no radio-induced heart attack victims, had heard nothing of anyone leaping from a roof in panic. New York Daily News radio editor Ben Gross wrote in his memoir that the streets of Manhattan were deserted that night towards the end of the broadcast as he was headed to the CBS headquarters in his taxi. No herds of people with eyes upturned awaiting their certain doom.
This is one of those cold opens where I now have to assimilate this into my my picture of the world.
Right. Well, hold on. I'm going to give you something else. Okay. I am going to give you something else. And after one sentence, I'm going to hit you with something here. So as Frank Stanton of CBS put it, quote, in the first place, most people didn't hear it, but those who did hear it looked at it as a prank and accepted it that way. But let me finish out by saying that while this panic never happened, and we've all been lied to, I'd be remiss in my JoAG duties if I didn't point out that the War of the Worlds actually did cause a panic that went so much harder than anything that was reported in our news. Are you ready, Mark?
Yes, please.
That broadcast happened about a decade after the first one, in February of 1949, when Radio Quito in Ecuador produced a Spanish-language version of War of the Worlds.
Oh.
According to the Telegraph, quote, Quito police and fire brigades rushed out of town to fight the supposed alien invasion force. After it was revealed that the broadcast was fiction, the panic transformed into a riot. The riot resulted in at least 7 deaths, including those of producer Leonardo Paez's girlfriend and nephew. The offices of Radio Quito and El Comercio, a local newspaper that had participated in the hoax by publishing false reports of unidentified flying objects in the days preceding the broadcast, were
so
both
good.
Burned to the ground.
World building. It's like an AR game. They kind of...
Right. And the Michigan Archive describes the absolutely horrific scene in that radio station. Quote, a radio host remained at the microphone pleading for the public, with whom the radio has historically had such close relationships, to help save them. The 2 musicians for the play, Raul Molestina and Prefecto Alvarado, had different strategies. The latter by staying put until the firemen came, and the former by jumping out of the 4th floor's window. Neither survived. Molestina was burnt to death, and Alvarado sustained fatal injuries from jumping. Wow. HistoryRadio.org noted that the army had to be called in with tear gas to disperse the angry crowd outside of the station.
And yet this has no cultural...
None
at all.
Isn't
the colossal
insane?
Fucking Spanish War of the Worlds radio clusterfuck.
Right? Basically, in this case, they'd one-upped the original by having the actual news, the newspaper, spread false stories about UFOs, priming the public to believe that this was really happening, because why would the news lie to them? So when the show aired, presumably without the warnings that had been throughout Orson Welles' one, you had an already on-edge public primed to believe the aliens were coming, and then erupting into a rage when they realized their institutions had colluded to trick them this way.
Set fire to the building.
Respect.
The old Spanish way.
R.I.P. to those 7 people, including like a child who died in this. But in terms of like how people respond to like their government and their news organizations lying to them, yeah, burn that shit down. Good job. That's the right play, and we should probably be doing that.
I am keeping up my sleeve for the right moment.
Okay.
A prank that is, I think, going to be both just the best and the worst thing that I could possibly ever do, right?
Is it on me?
No, it's not on you. It's on Laura.
Okay. That's fine.
There's a library of really convincing kind of imminent nuclear attack warning news bulletins on YouTube that people have created with really good kind of BBC graphics and, you know, the really legit looking BBC or Sky or whatever channel you want to use. So I'm going to put a few of those on around the house simultaneously on various devices, and then flip my shit and tell Laura that there's an imminent nuclear attack. And I reckon I could sell it.
I would love to see that. That would be amazing. Make sure you set up cameras or whatever, because it'll
Of
be
course, of course, of
hilarious
course.
whether it works or doesn't.
Yeah. One way or the other,
Your
it
wife's
can't
just
fail.
like, fuck off,
Fuck
Mark.
off, will you? Oh.
So there we go. There was a panic broadcast,
Scotched.
but ours is scotched.
God. Oh, very good, CoRri.
Oh, thank you very much, Mark.
Very good indeed.
I had fun with that, and thank you for your participation.
You're very welcome. I hope it hit the spot.
All right, you wanted to take us in, so take us in.
Yes, I will. So in welcoming us to your favorite podcast this week, hey, celebrate! It's Jack of all Graves time. Yeah. Woo, yes, and you've made the right fucking call in hitting play, and we thank you and we see you. But as I welcome you in this week, why don't we just take a moment to realize and acknowledge and accept and sit with the truth that we are all of us, each of us, wherever we are in the globe, walking around in kind of a cesspit just of filth all over us, right? A film
Okay.
of, dead cells and fucking parasites in our follicles, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And germs and other people's germs and effluent
Yeah.
and just absolute corruption all over us, all over our fucking skin, over every inch of our exposed bodies. There's this kind of almost an invading force, a miasma of filth around us at all times. Are you aware of that?
I mean, yeah, I try to not be as much as
Well,
possible.
well, it is there nonetheless, right? In
Yeah.
your lungs, in your and what this is to what Jack of all Graves is each week, I guess. And I'd like to extend this to you now, formalize this to you now, as an opportunity for you each week to just relax
Mm.
and, like I said, be in it and just almost open up your pores and just welcome it in.
Okay. Sure.
Just welcome it into you. Just let the toxicity, let the fucking absolute corruption around you just inhabit you and just sit with it a little bit. Just
Mm.
accept it.
Or you can reframe it, listen, you're never alone. You'll always
Yeah.
have
Take from it what you want. Take from it what you
your
will.
bugs.
But don't fight it because it's gonna exist anyway.
It's great. Thanks, Mark.
And
Thanks
all
for
that said,
that.
of course, I hope you're well. How are you doing, Corey? You good?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well today. A little tired.
Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit about this. A little bummed because this is officially my dog's final few days.
Okay.
So, but as a result of that, I'm having a
Mm.
good time this weekend, just like me and him hanging out. We're
Yeah.
like being
Yeah.
bros. We're watching
So it's this
movies. We're
week
like
then, is it? Yeah.
chilling. It's this week. Yeah. He is done. Poor
Oh
guy
fuck.
is so done. And the only
If he could
reason,
talk,
yeah,
would he
be
be
like,
saying, for
yeah,
fuck's
just like,
sake?
why? Why are you doing this? And the only reason that, he's still here is just because Keo gets back from work on Tuesday. So,
I see.
Wednesday we can bring him in. I wasn't gonna do it on my own.
Well, I know
So
you've done a few of them. It's not
famously
your
I've
first rodeo, is it? Yeah.
famously I've put a few dogs down. If you don't know what I'm referencing, just go to our reels on our
Just
Instagram
horror, just
and you can
absolute
see,
shock.
yeah, when I absolutely horrified Mark by saying I'd put dogs to sleep and he thought I meant that I just murdered dogs.
Mm.
But yeah, so yeah, I've been having a great weekend just, cuddling with my dog and watching movies and
And
all
I'm
that
sure
stuff.
he's having a great weekend, more to the point.
Yeah, as good a weekend as you
Uh-huh.
can have when you are a nearly dead dog. Yeah, for
Yes,
sure.
when he's almost got locked in syndrome. He's just
Pretty much, yeah.
just a
Just
fucking
a little husk of dog. He can't,
carcass.
he's like he's lost mobility basically.
I see.
Which
See,
means
yeah, you're doing the right
that,
thing here.
yeah, it's one of those things where it's like because like I told you like a month ago that I was like, I think we're about there. And then I was like, he's kind of rallied a little bit. And like, things were
And
good.
maybe got another
He
week.
has stopped rallying,
Ah, I see.
but so he's lost mobility, and this is like, it's funny to watch even though it's terrible. He he can't like hold himself up in order to eat or whatever. So like large I have to kind of like hold him or prop him on something to sort of be able to eat. And if I look away for a moment, if I turn back, he'll just be like on his
Oh
face on
no,
his side in
no,
like
no.
a plate of
Plonk.
pumpkin mush. And he's just like
Oh no.
licking sideways at the pumpkin, just like, this is fine. Just
So this
maybe
is
I'll
this
choke
is
on it. It'll be fine.
this is his last episode then, really? Is he in the
This
background?
is this is no, he's sleeping in the other room. I was gonna bring him in
Okay.
here, but he is for all intents and purposes dead to the world right now. He had his pumpkin mush this morning, and he has been sleeping ever since. Every now and again, I like go in there and like kind of like look, like his chest is
Prod him
moving,
a little bit.
right? Right?
Hold a mirror up
We
to his
still
nose.
good? And he's just like, maybe like blah, blah, stick his little tongue out for a second. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we're good. Just go do your shit. Like, okay,
Okay.
buddy. But yes, it will, today's episode is going to be about death. So,
That is
it's
true.
a good time to process the loss of my little man and all of that kind of stuff. So we got that going. But how are you, Mark?
I'm doing great, thank you. Yes. A really nice, calm, peaceful week. Um, I'm on top of things. Things feel good. Thank you.
Great. Love that everything's going well for you. Things are going to
Yes.
go really well for our whatever I think great bunch of lads on Ko-Fi, because mailings are coming.
Beautiful. And yes, we don't want to describe them before they
No,
arrive
I'm
today,
not
but
gonna.
Corri has described them to me and they're beautiful.
Yes, I'm very excited about this particular mailing. Very
Mm.
JoAG appropriate. And you know, yeah, it should be a good time. So those will be getting in the mail sometime this week. So if you are on our Ko-Fi in our highest tier, you'll be getting some mail soon.
You're also going to get a Let's Play this week out of nowhere. The fantastic news that Remedy are back. Fucking
Yes.
the absolute mad lads at Remedy Software are back with some DLC for Alan Wake 2. So you're going to get a Let's Play of that in the next few days and all, because I've downloaded it and it's been a pain not playing with it. So
I'm glad
I've
that
been holding on tight.
you've been patient about it. I was stoked to get to reveal this
I'm deep into
information to
Cowboy
you.
Game, by the way. I'm deep into Horse Simulator 2. Oh, so good.
That's for some reason I feel like that's like really having is there like an expansion or something? It feels like everybody's back to
Uh,
playing.
no, quite recently it was added to the PS Plus catalog, so it's
Oh, okay.
free to download for the first time in months and months and
Okay.
months.
That makes sense.
Brushing my horse, feeding my horse,
My
braiding my
lovely
horse's hair.
horse.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Riding my horse, giving it a carrot. Good.
It's really all your favorite things all in
Yep.
one place. Beautiful. Yeah, I was watching the like summer game thing the other day that everybody
Yes.
was
Oh, and
watching.
Alan, I got the scoop from you. Very
Yeah,
nice.
and so yeah, they revealed
Yes.
that and I like instantly was like, FYI. So I was like super stoked to get to
Mm.
reveal that to you as soon as it happened. So mailings coming, Let's Play coming. We have book club coming this weekend, The
Mm.
Fervor by Amakatsu. So pick that up if you haven't yet. And we will be hanging out 7 p.m. Eastern time, 4 p.m. Pacific time, and you'll have to figure that out anywhere else that you live. Um, as I've mentioned before, our poor Dan is constantly sort of winging it and seeing when he shows up because he's in Australia. So yeah,
Dan
it's
takes all
tricky.
of the shit we say about Australia on the chin and never
He does.
complains. Thanks,
I
buddy.
know. Seriously, he's never once brought up the how much we shit talk Australia in here. And for that, great man.
Yes.
But yeah, so book club this weekend on our Discord, and also on the Discord, I have made a channel for people to join to sort of keep up with info about our meetup. I was gonna say watch along, and I'm like, that's
I
not
wondered.
the term I was
I
going for.
wondered where your brain was going to land. So
Did
I
you
saw
just
it.
see it like
Your mouth kind
gears
of played out a
turning?
few options. Good.
Yeah, that was a struggle for a second there. Meet up. Yes. So trying to sort of proactively make sure people know what's going on with that. We've had, DMs and things like that, people being like, what? So what's the
Oh,
dates and all
it's
that?
so exciting.
And it's coming on up. So if you are somewhere in the eastern United States, or you're jonesing for a trip to New York or whatever the case may be, start making those flights and booking those hotels and all of that kind of stuff. But follow our Discord for any updates and things like that as we go. I'm working on a
Tell everyone
PDF
about about
full of
about what you're doing, about what
about
you
my
do.
tour guiding.
Yeah.
So I found out. So one of the events that we're going to do, you're so amused by this because this is deeply the most me thing imaginable.
The
One of the things
brand.
one of the things that we're gonna do is on the Saturday of the meetup, I'm gonna take you all on a little tour in New York City, see some dark spots, see, the Ghostbusters firehouse, of course, things like that, tell you some cool New York history and things like that. So you really get a chance to most people are gonna come out here and they would pay for a tour or whatever. I'm saying, hey, thanks for coming. What if I give you the
Yeah.
tour? And then you can
Yep.
spend the rest of your time in New York, going to Broadway shows or, whatever. So I'm going to give a little tour. But a thing I found out is that in order to publicly speak to people on the streets of New York City in any capacity, you need
Just to
a
address
just
the
to
public.
address a group on the
Fuck
streets of New
me,
York
man.
City. You need to
Is there
have a tour
anything that
guide
cannot be
license.
monetized, that cannot be
Right? Seriously.
commodified?
I mean, I guess when it comes down to it, it's probably for the best. So I'm sure this was
I
born
don't
out of
know.
the chaos of people not knowing any of the rules and darting
Mm.
into traffic and doing all kinds of crazy shit in New York. But you have to have a tour guide license. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'll get a tour guide license, which involves a 150 question exam about New York, far reaching. You got to know about the food, you got to know about the boroughs, you got to know about
Right. Can we
historical
do a snack on
figures.
this month? Do you want to give me some of those questions this month and see if I could become a New York City tour guide?
That sounds like fun. Maybe,
New
yeah, we'll
York City.
snack on New York tourism. It'll be a
Cool.
very fun time. Yeah, so I am in the process of becoming a licensed New York State tour guide so that I can bring you all on this adventure. So hopefully, listen,
Cool
show
as fuck.
up so that you will make this worth my while to have done this. And then I'm going to show you my little lanyard with my cool tour guide license on it. It's going to be really a good time.
See, it would be equally as cool if it was just me and you.
Which, I mean, realistically, if I were just taking you around New York City, I would wear the lanyard.
Of course you would.
I mean, come on.
Come on.
It's good. I might just wear it the whole weekend just for fun.
Yeah, but
Listen,
again,
I worked really hard for this.
yes, more quintessential Corrigan hijinks there.
Mm-hmm.
Just CoRri doing CoRri stuff.
Exactly. 100% that. As I was saying, I have been working on a PDF of information for people who will be coming on this as well. So once you're locked in and all that kind of stuff, and we've got everything locked down, you get a nice PDF that'll tell you all the plans and the times and the apps you need to download and where everything is and, all that stuff. So listen, it's going to be a good
Sounds
time.
fucking killer.
Yeah, a good time with us, with the Dead and Lovelies. It'll be great.
Sold.
Anything further, Marco, before we moved on to what we watched?
No further business, Your Honor.
Perfect. Then let's chat about what we had on our televisions this week, eh?
Okay, let's take a little look. Where did we leave last week? The coffee table?
Yep.
Okay. What do you got? I got the let's look, I thought there was some quality here, but there's not. I've also got one that I haven't added, which I might make you ask me 20 questions to try and guess.
I am not doing that again.
But,
Not yet. Maybe another
oh
time.
man, am I burned out on nuns, man?
Yeah. I don't know why. I mean, even I
They're good.
considered after last week's conversation, I was like, maybe I'll watch Rosemary's Baby, and then I was
Oh.
looking at it, I looked at the description. I was like, this is the same movie as the other two movies I watched this week. I'm not
Maybe you
doing
can
it.
help me with this, right? Being, with your book smarts and your kind of your
Mm,
school learning and whatever, right? Um, Deep Impact
sure.
and what was the other fucking asteroid one? Armageddon,
Oh, sure. Yep.
right?
Hmm.
Volcano and Dante's Peak,
Sure.
Ants and A Bug's Life,
Right.
and now All the Nuns,
No,
right?
nuns.
The Pope's
Yes.
Exorcist, The First Omen,
Hmm.
Immaculate, Exorcist Believer. What causes these occasional bursts of thematic synergy in Hollywood? Why do frequently out of nowhere different studios come up with the same movie?
Yeah, I mean, well, like I said, the last several times we've talked about this, of course, when it comes to nun movies, they're just all the same movie anyway.
Okay.
So there's that to it. But I do think like culturally, like why the like religious horror is coming back around probably has a lot to do with like bodily autonomy in the United States and
Yeah.
like, the fact of sort of the like Christofascism rising here and religion being further sort of inserted into our politics than it has been in a long time,
Yes.
and being very effectively um inserted into our politics, that I think that like this moment absolutely causes people to like start making the horrors that are about
Yeah, that feels plausible. I
Christians
mean,
oppressing us.
is it, broadly when the same movie seems to be made like at the same time by two separate companies, that happens too often for it to just be coincidental? Is it just sharing ideas? Is it skullduggery or leaks? What is it? What is that? How does that
I
happen?
think it is coincidence. I mean, like if you think about it, like say, you know, again, I think like we're in a like this is a hot topic right now kind of situation. So if people are going to
Yeah.
make Catholic religious horror, it's largely going to be the same storyline. And then
Mm,
you're looking at like remakes, right? So like aside from the Sydney Sweeney one, remakes, sequels, things like that. So they're playing off of things that are already existing properties. So like the
yes.
Sydney Sweeney one is just like a rip off of Rosemary's Baby and The Omen and all of these kinds of things that already exist. And then there's an Omen remake coming out at the same time. So I think it's just kind of like, you know, studios looking and being like, this pitch for this thing is really timely. And
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it goes all the way back to that Russell Crowe. Was it Russell Crowe that we saw?
yeah, the
The
Pope's
fucking
Exorcist.
the Pope's Exorcist. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like a more of a glut than the usual kind of every couple of years you'll get
It
some
does,
Nuncore. It seems
yeah.
like there's
And that's interesting though, because the Pope's Exorcist falls more along, if I recall correctly, falls more along the lines of my other category of religious horror, which is the more like celebratory of the
yeah,
church kind, like
yeah.
where the church is kind of the good guy, or at
Well,
least
yeah,
a
that was
pope or a church figure is the good guy.
yeah, that was the church was the fucking Men in Black organization, wasn't it?
Right.
Just
Yeah, exactly. So
um
we've definitely got two ends of this thing happening.
I mean, all of which is to say that that's way more conversation than I was expecting to get out of The Exorcist Believer, which
Yeah, I have
is
not heard good things about that.
tepid,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely tepid as fuck. Nothing, no material likely to challenge, or it's dull. It's very dull.
Mm.
There you
Which is
go. And I
unfortunate.
am
I love
burned
Leslie
out.
Odom, but
Well, I like Ellen Burstyn,
there you go.
a great deal,
Yeah, it's
but
kind of a waste to bring her back and then use it in like a terrible movie.
yeah, exactly. It's all very stock. I would describe it as it's just they've
Mm-hmm.
rummaged around in the fucking Nuncore box of surprises
Right.
and done a few of them, and nothing to write home about.
Yeah, I'm not on my list at all. This is
No,
I've
and nor should
subjected
it be.
myself to enough religious horror, and that's one that's like, yeah, it's just not there.
Yeah, if you were to ask me, in hindsight, why did I bother? I
You
could not tell you any earthly reason why.
just got into a zone.
Yeah, yeah. It was quicker to come out rather than go through.
Try to go around or
Yep.
something.
So I thought, look, I've got to just suck it up
You
and
just
watch.
bear went over the mountain debt. I get it. I
Yeah.
I
So
got in
don't
a
bother.
zone this week actually. I I asked you to put The Fugitive
Ah,
on Plex. And this is just one of those things where like I've lately really been jonesing for like sort of like the 90s thriller because it's just like I've had that thing where I'm like I want to watch a movie that's like a movie,
certainly.
like it really feels
Certainly.
like a movie. And a
Yeah.
90s thriller is like the ultimate in that to me.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was like, I've never well, I don't know if that's true. I want to say I've never seen at least all of The Fugitive. So there's certain scenes in it that I remember watching like when it aired on TV and stuff like that that were like really vividly I remembered them. But like
I think were that mood to occur to me, I think I would reach for something by John Woo. I think I would reach for Face Off or
sure,
something
I
like
love
that.
Face Off. I mean, I watched that one fairly regularly, I would say.
It's been a while. I mean, I know it
Yeah.
inside out, but it has been a
Yeah.
while. What a film, by the way.
Right. Yeah. Like, even like something like Con Air too, like those weird, like
Aye,
Nicolas Cage things from that time. Did you just say I?
I did. Aye,
Love that.
AYE.
Yeah. No, I got it. My dad used to say that. I don't hear that a whole heck of a lot. But, anyways. Uh,
That's hilarious. Aye.
yeah, but I think the thing was like there's a lot of like 90s stores that kind of go back to over and over again. And then there's like a stock of them that like I have not seen or only saw bits of on TV when I was a kid. And The Fugitive is absolutely one of those. And so I decided to put that on.
Mm.
And found it absolutely delightful. I mean, just Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones being like peak them in these movies, which one of the things that I think is like great is for Harrison Ford IRL like
Yeah.
comes off as real degaff about being an actor, right? Like he does
He does.
not.
That feels cultivated, though. That feels affected.
Right.
I think he
Because
definitely plays himself, doesn't he?
yeah, and then when you watch his movies, you're like, this is a guy who like likes doing this. Like this is an actor, you
Yes.
know? Um, and so I was just thinking about like the public persona of Harrison Ford versus the guy you watch in a movie
So
like
let me
this.
super quickly ask you then, outside of what's your favorite Harrison Ford role that isn't Star Wars or an
Hmm.
indie?
Oh geez. I it's difficult for me to think
It
on the
is.
spot of these
Okay.
kinds of things. Yeah, and like of course the only things that pop into my head are like things I don't like What Lies Beneath and stuff like that, which
Mm.
I can't remember if I've said this on here, but I've said this a million times. When I'm picking a horror podcast, the first episode I listen to is always the What Lies Beneath episode to determine whether I want to continue listening to it.
Is that so? I like that.
It's yeah, it's like what someone's take on that movie is says a lot about them. And that was,
Ah,
that was what I did with Dead and Lovely. Listen to What Lies Beneath, and they were like, they know this movie sucks. Okay,
fine.
let's go
Fine.
on.
Okay.
But anyways, yeah, I'm not sure off the top of my head. Do you have one that you think of off the top of your head?
Uh, as soon as I asked you, I tried to find one of my own, and I came up blank. I couldn't think of anything.
Yeah, I don't know why. It's like I feel
Mm.
like I've seen many Harrison Ford movies, and for whatever reason, my mind just went like a complete blank on what they are.
Mm.
But The Fugitive was a great time. I'd probably put that up on the list. Harrison Ford on the run, trying to prove his innocence in the death of his wife and doing it kind of all wrong. Um, well, meanwhile, there's like allegedly a one-armed man who is responsible
Yeah.
for it, which sounds so deeply made up. And on the other hand, you've got Tommy Lee Jones as this like just asshole ranger who's out to like find him and like doesn't give a shit about anything or anyone and is like making quips and all this kind of stuff, just like this total cocky douchebag. Oh, it's
Quipping the
perfection.
whole time.
Just quipping like nobody's business. So I watched that, and then of course what came up like on Letterboxd as like related was Double Jeopardy, which
Mm.
is basically the same movie. Tommy Lee Jones again out to find someone. This time he's like a parole officer, and it's Ashley
That's one
Judd
of his other,
who.
one of Tommy Lee Jones's other roles.
Yes, Ashley Judd.
Ranger, parole officer, sheriff.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yep. Like FBI-ish person,
Yes,
like in
yes,
Men in
yes,
Black,
yes,
right?
yes, yes.
So Ashley Judd is framed for the murder of her husband by her husband in like sort of a girl sort of scenario. And he goes off and sort of starts a new life while she goes to prison for this.
Mm.
But while in prison, someone's like, you can't be tried for the same crime twice. And like after you've already been like convicted of it, you can't be tried for that again.
Of
And
course.
so
Double
she
jeopardy.
double jeopardy manages to get parole and then goes on a journey to try to murder her husband for real this time. And this movie, everything about it is completely implausible. Like there's no fucking way that's how double jeopardy works. And it's like the movie knows it. Like there's a point in this where like Tommy Lee Jones like says something like like and as a former lawyer I can confirm that's true or something like that. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
he
yeah, yeah.
knows you're sitting they
Looks it
know
up
you're
in a
sitting there
big leather
going
bound tome.
like they know you're at home going I don't think that's how it works. And they're like,
Is this
no, no,
law?
no. This is for sure how it works. You could definitely murder your husband and not get in trouble for it. But it doesn't matter because the whole movie, like she's broken parole and is breaking like tons of laws that would throw her in jail again anyway. So like there's no point in any of this double jeopardy
Uh,
nonsense because she should be thrown in jail for the rest of her life for like breaking a million laws.
Multiple other laws, I see.
Yeah, afterwards, all in violation of her release. And it's like the like Bruce Greenwood plays her husband, and it's like he just moves to San Francisco and like becomes like a rich famous guy again, but like no one's like, is that the same guy? And then he kills another woman and then just moves to New Orleans and becomes a rich famous guy again. And I'm like, no, like okay. I know there's
Credulous.
no Facebook, but like,
Mm.
come the fuck on. Are you serious? Oh, it's such a great time. Watch Double Jeopardy. It makes no sense. And
How
is a
did
delight.
where was the on ramp onto that bit of conversation? How did we get there?
I was just talking about what movies I watched.
So you've seen that this week. That's like a
Yes.
Harrison Ford movie.
Yes. So
You've seen
I
Double
watched The
Jeopardy this week. Right,
Fugitive
right,
and
right,
then
right, right. I
it was
thought you just tailed off.
no, no,
I
no, no,
really
no.
did. I thought you just oof,
No,
got
I
the
watched The Fugitive and then Letterbox told me to watch Double
finally.
Jeopardy. And
Okay,
so
okay, okay.
I watched Double Jeopardy afterwards, and I feel great about both of those movies. The
Excellent.
Fugitive is a much better movie than Double Jeopardy is, but listen, Double Jeopardy is so stupid you can't be mad at it. You just gotta go
Thank
for the
you.
ride.
Um, in a similar vein, Stung.
Oh, right.
Every now and again, look, it's such a thrill, and it will continue to be a thrill until my eyes and ears give up and I can no longer see or enjoy movies. But it's so nice to take a fucking roll of the dice on a movie you've never heard of before and have it turn out to be not dreadful and quite entertaining.
Yes, you liked this one a lot more than I did, but there
Yeah,
were but it's a I thought it was funny that you like this is the second week in a row we've watched like a creature movie.
I like the monsters, don't I? You know
Yeah,
this.
you love monsters, and for some reason we don't watch a ton of them.
Well,
And so
let's change
like,
that up by all means. I could watch
yeah,
a fucking monster all day long.
right? I was like, this is you're having the best time. This isn't even a very good movie, and you're loving life. Like, we should watch more creature movies. And this, I mean, there's some gore and craziness in this movie that's
Yep,
pretty fun. It's a movie about some
just
caterers who
giant
are
mutant
attacked by
wasps.
giant wasps. Yeah, basically
That's all
at
you
a
need to
big
know.
party. Here's my like two things about this movie that like kind of tanked my enjoyment of it. Like it's 2014, I think, something like
Yes.
that. So it's on that cusp
Yeah.
of like where it's still kind of the 2000s and 2010s like misogyny and douchebaggery in it. And so
Yes,
the
you are correct. It was 2015, so yes, you are bang
2015,
on.
yeah. So the like male lead in it is terrible. And I said at the beginning of this, if they get together, I'm going to be very mad because she
Yeah, that's
knew he
true.
was awful the whole beginning
Yeah.
of this
And
movie.
he
And
doesn't
then
there's
he's
no
like,
arc for him. He
there's
doesn't
no
kind of
arc. He's just good at
learns
killing
nothing.
murder wasps. And like
Yeah.
that's enough. And they get together at the end. And so that upset me. And the other thing is, this is like basic screenwriting right here. there's a moment in this film where he's like trying to like make her feel better, the female lead, and he asks her what, oh god, I can't remember the joke, but he asks her a joke, begins a joke about the
Oh,
bee.
yes, I remember.
And I don't remember what it is, but let's just say it's what's a
Yeah.
bee's favorite movie. It was something like
I
that,
think
right?
I even think it might have been
It
that,
might have been what's a bee's
Yeah,
favorite
yeah.
movie. And then they get interrupted and, you know, chaos breaks out and he doesn't get to finish the joke. So if you're a screenwriter writing this movie, what then happens? Where do we go with this? Right? End of the
Yeah.
movie. They're sitting together in an ambulance, having kind of an awkward moment. You know, it's like they're about to kiss or whatever and things like that, but there's like a moment where they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
What should
And it's
happen?
on a plate, isn't it? It's on a plate.
It's on a plate. Turn to her, say, "What's a bee's favorite movie?" And either finish the joke or have her
Credits roll.
say, "Fuck, I don't care," and they kiss, or credits roll or whatever, right? But you have to come back to that joke. You can't just leave that sitting there. And I was just so angry with that little, just, you got the...
Yeah, rightly so. You pointed out and it seems...
You got the callback right there and you don't go for it. What are you doing? What are you doing?
Well, what are you doing? You need to write a movie, clearly.
Well, that's true. I'm just waiting for
Be
you
the
to
change you wish to see in the
jump
world.
on with me. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Someday.
I'll be in it, obviously. I'll be performing in it.
Well, clearly.
Mm-hmm. Let me see. Was there anything else? There was Under Paris.
Yes. Yeah, we both watched Under Paris, the shark movie that's taking the internet by storm.
So, look, I watch everything with subtitles, as do you, I believe, as does anyone. You don't automatically put the subs on, do you know?
Well, you know I hate subtitles, but
I know you hate subtitles that
yeah.
you're forced into watching.
Right, yes. In this case, it automatically started with the dub. Did it do that for you?
No, it didn't.
Oh, okay. It's American Netflix always starts you with the dub if there's a dub for something, and then you have to switch it away from it. And partway through the movie, I was like, man, this is like so one note and boring. It must be the sound. And so I switched it to the subtitles, and it turned out that's just the movie.
Yes. But right, I watch everything with subtitles. That's where I was going with this. And within the first 30 seconds to a minute, one of the subtitles says "shark growls." Right?
Like, oh no.
Fuck it does. Sharks don't fucking, I don't give a fuck how mutant they are, right? And that's how it starts. That's the premise. That's the baseline of credulity which this film kind of kicks off from. And it only gets worse. I only watched it after seeing who the director was.
That seems to be what has tricked a lot of people.
Yeah, Javier Gens, who did a fantastic French horror movie about a decade ago called Frontiers. Frontier. Really uncompromising, really fucking... There was a kind of a French horror at a minute there, didn't it? Where there was some really fucking brutal kind of French horror that came along like a decade or so ago, and Frontiers was one of those. But in a kind of a massive episode of lost promise or missed potential, he's done fuck all with it. Since you know, music, TV episodes, just filler stuff. So I came into Under Paris with a certain optimism.
Right.
Is that what this is? You know, is this going to be a little sleeper hit, some brutality? But within 30 seconds, we had a roaring shark. So,
and listen, like, I can accept stupidity like that, right? But you have to like keep that energy. The problem with this movie is like it takes itself very seriously, but not in a fun way, like a Sci-Fi Channel movie takes itself seriously.
What, like Deep Blue Sea, you mean?
Right, or Deep Blue Sea. Yeah, right. Like, so if you're gonna be like, all right, I have growling sharks and they're like they're in the subways and now they're underneath the Seine and all this kind of stuff, fine. But then like that's insane. So this movie needs to be insane. And it's not. It's like just watching like shark scientists and the Coast Guard or whatever, like, talk about shark science and Coast Guard, but then it's not well researched either. Like, and there's like a shark scientist that like people may know from Twitter, and he's on Blue Sky as well. David Schiffman. I can't think of what his name is. Um, Anyone like you would know who he is if you know a shark scientist on the
Sure,
internet.
sure,
It's this
sure.
guy. And he like did like he was like, people keep asking me, fine, I will do a thread about this
I think I
movie.
have read this, yes.
Yeah, and like it's just everything on a basic level is wrong in this movie. And it's like, again, fine, but then do something with that.
Yeah.
Like it can't be boring and wrong. If you're gonna go wrong, like crank it to 11 then.
Yeah, completely. Or, I mentioned Deep Blue Sea very intentionally because that that vibe in this movie would have been perfect.
Right, exactly. 100%.
But that is
Deep Blue
not the
Sea, The
vibe in this
Meg,
movie.
things like that. Like, yeah,
Yeah, you
go
know what I
in,
mean?
you know?
That's that Piranha, for fuck's sake. That kind of vibe. Put some
Right.
titty in it. That would have been more entertaining than what we got.
It's got Bernice Bejo in it. It was not going to be a titty flick. Like, she's like a
No,
respectable actress. She's in
yes,
an
yes, she is.
Oscar-winning movie.
That's not a solution that I recommend to, put some titty in it. Isn't something I generally fall back on. But what I'm
But
saying
like,
is,
yeah, the point is it should
what I'm saying
be
is, there
escalated.
are, sci-fi shark core movies that are entertaining,
Mm-hmm.
and Deep Blue Sin, which I'm fucking coining, is not that. It is not entertaining
Right.
at all. So
Yeah, no.
maybe it should have tried to take a leaf out of a better movies book.
Yeah, it needed to be worse or it needed to be better, is
There you go.
basically the
There
issue
you
here.
fucking go. Yes. Commit to the bit.
Yeah, so no recommendations on Under Paris here, but you're gonna watch it anyway
No.
because everybody's watching it. It's like
You
just it's
gotta.
there, you know. It
Yeah.
is the Mount Everest of Netflix movies. It's just there.
It's simply there. I also watched The Strangers Part 1, the beginning of The Strangers.
Oh, yeah.
It says everything, but I haven't even put it on Letterboxd. It left no impact.
It is it's so oh, did I now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, did I talk about it last week or did I not log it either?
Um, you've mentioned it. I don't know if it was just to me or on the cast, but you've certainly mentioned it as
Okay. Yeah,
being
I'm like,
dog
did I
egg.
just Yeah, it's awful. It's just a bad remake of the original Strangers movie,
Yeah,
meant
yeah.
only to start a new Strangers franchise, basically.
Yes. When you can see the fucking, when you can see the business plan behind the movie, when you can see the
Right.
fucking timeline and the spreadsheet,
Yeah.
it's serves no purpose, does it? It's
I did not talk about this because there's like multiple things in this that I just need to get out. Okay.
please.
Okay, one thing, like one of the problems, like you said, like you could see the marketing plan with this whole thing. And this movie is a movie that no one gave a shit about because it's not important. It's just there to jumpstart the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
next stage
No one
of the
asked for
Strangers,
this.
right? And so, like, one of the like most like did not give a shit things in this movie is there is a British actor in this who plays a mechanic, right? Where does a mechanic work?
In a garage.
In a garage, right? If you're
Fixing
British,
cars. Fixing cars, my lady.
yeah, if you're British,
Yeah.
not if you're American. No one
Okay.
told him that. So multiple times this backwoods Oregon mechanic talks about his garage, which is not a thing we say here. And like no one at any point was like, I think a mechanic would know how to say garage.
Yeah.
Like I don't think he'd say it like that. It's like no one gave a shit in this movie. No one was like, maybe we should tell the British guy how to pronounce this word that has to do with his job. That might
Yeah.
be a
I
good
don't recall.
idea.
And did he say he dropped garage in an American accent?
Yeah, like he's talking an American
Wonderful.
accent the whole time, but he says
Mm,
garage. It's like,
wonderful.
I need to take the car back to my garage. I was like, what the fuck?
Oh, that's just English, Bob. That's just English, Mike. Don't worry about
He came here as a child. That
it.
word just, stuck. I don't like it's so ridiculous. Uh And then the other thing with this movie is that, like, I always say that the thing about home invasion movies that makes them scary is like that it feels like it could happen to you, right? Like, especially
Certainly.
like with the strangers, it's like it's just, what the thing about the strangers that
Yes,
makes
I think
it
everyone remembers a kind of a home invasion story on the news, for example.
right.
They do
Yeah.
happen. They do take place.
Yeah, and you hear the noises around your house and things
Hmm.
like that, and you're like, it makes your imagination, act up, and you think this is happening to you. Um, and so like the original Strangers is like scary, because it's like it's dealing with this idea that like listless kids with nothing better to do would do this just because you were home, right?
Mm.
And thus, it feels like this could happen. This Strangers they like these invaders have superpowers. So it's like 1 second they can be standing behind you and then
Yeah.
you run your hand through your hair and they're gone. Or, they're like at your door and then they're 100 feet away in the woods and stuff like
Yes.
that. And it's
Yes.
like, that can't happen to me. Magical home
Yes.
invaders can't attack me. So, like, this isn't scary in any
The
way.
magical
This
strangers.
the magical strangers, like who the fuck
Mm.
cares, so there's like no element of realism in this. And the other thing that I mentioned in our Ko-Fi episode about the strangers was that another thing that's so effective about the original strangers is that until they start getting tired and panicky, they're largely making the right decisions,
Uh-huh.
and things keep on not working out for them, and that's a terrifying
Yeah.
idea. You're not
In
like, oh,
contrast to something
yeah,
like a movie that I know you love, Funny Games, where
right.
it feels as though in both iterations of that movie, they don't follow the playbook, man. They did the wrong
Right.
fucking thing, and it's very
Exactly.
difficult.
And so like, it's terrifying to think you could keep on doing the right thing and these people are always a step ahead
Mm.
of you. Whereas the new strangers are these people are the dumbest human beings on the planet, including when like the home invasion has already started. The girl just takes the time to sit and have a beer and a joint. What?
Yeah, yeah.
What are you doing? Are you kidding me? It's just so stupid. Makes me angry. And I wanted to go see In a Violent Nature and decided instead to go see The Strangers. And then
But listen,
when I went to
thank you
some
for
movie,
waiting for that, right? Thank you for
yes,
waiting for me for A Violent Nature because I'm
yeah,
desperate to see it, and I think it's one that we should consume
right.
together.
Yeah, I did ask and you acted indifferent to it. I was like, should I save it for you? And you were like, meh, do what you want. And then I went and saw The Strangers, and it was terrible. So just know, even with your indifference, I did that for you.
You are
And
the
saw The
best. Thank you.
Strangers instead.
And again, very
Yeah,
telling that neither of us have even bothered letterboxing it. Neither of us have
right.
fucking bothered writing it
Just
down.
completely forgot
Mm.
that it even existed. Tara, even though I clearly have a lot of feelings about it.
Yeah.
It was much like forgetting to talk about Civil War when I like have deep rage about that movie. Forgot about this
Uh,
one.
I I could quite happily never watch another Nuncore movie again.
Good. Yeah, I feel great about that. You
Yeah.
already have seen them all at
All of
this
them by now,
point.
yeah. It'll be
Yeah,
a special film that brings me back to Nuncore.
right? That isn't the same plot
Mm.
again. The only other things that I watched the Guillermo del Toro movie, his first one, Cronos,
Yes.
which I had never seen before. I did not like it. um,
Uh, I'd be hard pressed to remember it. I know I've seen it. I remember
yeah.
a climactic kind of battle on a rooftop in the rain, possibly. I know I've seen the movie, but
Yeah,
I
this is one
couldn't.
of those ones that must have come from like your handwritten list because you do have it logged on Letterboxd, but
Sure.
you don't have a rating on it.
Yep.
It's kind of an unorthodox vampire movie,
Sure.
about like an old man who finds this little,
Scarab kind of thing, isn't it?
yeah, like a scarab sort of thing that it he like kind of latches it to his body and it turns him into this like bloodthirsty monster of sorts. um, it's so weird. It's like just like the entire time I felt like I was just like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And it was one of those ones that it was like I had to look at letterbox reviews afterwards and be like, am I dumb or is this like a super confusing movie? And sure enough, there are other people who are like, I don't know what happened in this movie. It's got ideas for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's certainly the seeds of something and not like fully formed. Like, okay, I see how this guy is going to become the GDT that we all know and love, but he is not there yet.
It's critically acclaimed, I believe. I think a lot of people like Cronos.
I mean, I feel like I don't know about like critics critically acclaimed, but I mean, it's kind of middling when it comes to the letterbox. There's people who are
I
like,
see.
it's a masterpiece, and there's people who hate it. And I think it's got like
Hmm.
a low threes score on it. So it's not like, yeah, it's certainly not like his later stuff that is, more widely
Yeah, yeah,
celebrated.
yeah, yeah.
But now, I have seen, I think that's that and the circusy one are the only GDT movies I don't like.
The
Otherwise,
circusy one.
I can never remember the name of this, and this is not the first time that this has happened on
Right.
here.
Is this one
Bradley
with Bradley
Cooper,
Cooper?
hmm
Right. Midnight
Nightmare Alley,
Alley. There
Nightmare
you
Alley.
go. There
That's
you
the
go.
one that sucked. But otherwise,
I think
I'm generally a big fan of him.
no joke or exaggeration, I have attempted to watch Midnight fucking Paradise Circus Alley on no less than 3 occasions and fallen asleep each time. Never seen it through.
Yeah, you're not missing anything there. Um, but yeah, I watched a couple docs. I watched the MoviePass documentary, MoviePass MovieCrash,
Okay.
which is, it tells the story. So if
Yeah.
you're interested in what happened with MoviePass, if you had a MoviePass, it's worth checking out. I was a MoviePass obsessive, so it was fun to see.
Just in a
But
sentence, what is that?
oh, MoviePass.
Yeah.
MoviePass was a little credit card type thing that you could get that for $10 a month you could watch 3 movies a week. Actually no, in the beginning it was you could watch a movie every single day, one movie every 24 hours in the theater with this little card. Um and it like blew up and everybody was getting their movie pass going to see movies with it.
Yeah.
What's interesting in this, I did not know it was initially a black owned company, and these two guys had this whole vision for it, and then these two white assholes came in and just fucking tanked the
Son of a bitch.
entire thing. Those guys are still in various lawsuits and all kinds of stuff regarding this whole situation and everything. But yeah, it was like huge, and honestly, it changed like how we see movies in the United States. Like they had like the movies had to change as a result. So like AMC and probably other I think Regal does this too. Like you now have like memberships. It's more expensive than that, but like $26 a month you
Yeah.
can see 3 movies every week, right? Like, things like that wouldn't have happened. Movie Pass forced its hand by
Yeah, I mean,
having this.
every chain bar View, which is the only one I would fucking want some kind of subscription service to because it's a 5 minute walk into town.
Right.
But Odeon do some kind of loyalty
Yeah.
cards, and you will do, I would love a monthly, any kind of service I could contribute
Right.
to do to every month and get to just walk in as I please.
Yeah, and just go see whatever. Yeah, it was great. And that's now like that model
Mm.
only exists because of MoviePass. It would all be the same as it used to be if it weren't for what MoviePass did there. And so, yeah, MoviePass, MovieCrash details, how they started, what their vision was for it, and all of that kind of stuff.
Will they, do you think? I mean, what I'm quite eager for a disruptor, Corey. I'm quite eager for something to fucking upend where things are currently in terms of
Mm-hmm.
how we are served and how we consume and how we pay for media. Um,
Yeah. I mean, the problem is everything was disrupted and now it's coming back around to the old models, but worse.
mm,
It's the issue. People disrupted and were like, hey, what if we gave you this? And now they're like, that wasn't actually profitable. Let's just sell it back to you for more.
well, much like I said earlier on about um, having to pay and register and qualify to be able to just address the public in New York. Um, all I'm going to sound like is just an old prick while I'm saying this, but me and Peter earlier on sat down and played Street Fighter 5 a little bit, right?
Mhm.
It was on, downloaded for free, la la la.
Right.
And literally only like 8 or 12 of 30 odd characters was playable without
Oh God, I
having to
hate that.
grind and unlock and pay
Mm-hmm.
um to get the others. And I hate it. I just absolutely fucking
Yeah,
hate
it's
it.
the worst.
I hate how things are rented to us piecemeal.
Right.
I hate it. I fucking
And
hate it.
it's, what's even more galling is it's the huge AAA studios and stuff like that that are doing that, the ones that don't need the money. If Devolver wanted to do that
Yes,
with,
yes.
Cult of the Lamb or something, fine. Like, they keep giving me
Yeah.
free expansions on that game, and I buy little character packs just to like support them,
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
like it's these companies that like don't need the money and aren't paying the people who like work
Yeah,
for
sure.
them more for this and are just like, getting unlimited funds from us. Like that is what is so galling about that model. Just being, yeah, sucked dry over things that don't
Yeah,
help
I mean,
anybody.
digital delivery is not without its benefits, right?
Hmm.
Like literally earlier on in this very self same episode, you can buy a game and get updates and new stuff for that game years after it's,
Right.
extending its relevancy and its shelf life. Like I'm about to do with Alan Wake 2, can't wait.
Right.
But if the trade-off is, like the cyberpunk affair, which I guarantee you is a movie waiting to happen.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Movies about things so hot right now. The cyberpunk fucking Farrago will definitely happen. But if you can just release unfinished games and bits of games and then rent them out, in strips, I hate it. I just
Yeah.
give me the thing. Don't tease the thing or
Yeah.
rent me the thing
Yeah.
or chop up the thing to get me to pay in bits for the thing. Just let me buy the thing. Give me the
Yes,
thing and
exactly.
all
Like
of the
not
thing.
even having the option to do like buy the
Yeah, yeah,
complete
yeah,
thing is what's really frustrating. It's like how
yeah,
now like movies just don't come out on Blu-ray or DVD or anything like that. TV shows don't come
yeah, yeah,
out and
yeah.
it's like you don't even have the option to pay to own the thing. You can only rent the thing at their
Mm.
pleasure. It is
Yes,
so frustrating fully. And you're right, we need new models for this or old models. Bring the old models
yes.
back, whatever.
But
Just not
look,
the way things are.
if we're yearning for new models, that's probably not the most pressing. If we're going to sort
Sure.
anything out, maybe that can take a number.
Mm, well, listen, when we're stuck in our Ready Player One world, we'll have
Yeah,
wished we addressed this sooner. That's for
we
sure.
will.
Then the other thing that I watched was Dancing for the Devil, the 7M TikTok cult, which, as with every documentary, is more episodes than it needs to be. And also, the thing about this, so I had watched stuff about this on YouTube. Like, I'd watched a YouTuber unpack some of this, and it's like a dance cult, essentially. This guy who like created like a management company for all these TikTok dancers who had like millions of followers and was like, let's like
Okay.
put you in a house and we're
Wow.
gonna like, but he was like a Christian. So all these like, dancers became very heavily involved in his like church and all this kind of stuff. And it was like a ministry and all that. Um, and there's specifically like kind of the focus is these two sisters who were dancers and were really close. They did everything together and all that. And then over the course, as one of them got more involved in the cult, kind of cut off her family and doesn't really talk much to them anymore and for a long time didn't talk to them at all and just like
Yeah,
cold
yeah, yeah,
turkey
yeah,
was like as happens with people in cults. um but there's like a B story here that should be the A story of these other Asian sisters. And I'm trying to think, they might be Korean, I'm not entirely sure, but they're like immigrants. And
yeah.
the leader of this cult is an Asian man. And this one woman was like, both of the sisters were in the cult for a long time, but the one of the sisters was in it for 23 years and was basically like raped by this guy for years.
Oh,
And then the like kind of last straw to her leaving was when his wife came in and started like beating her and tearing all her stuff up, being like, that's my husband and all this kind of stuff. Like, she's not, it's not, she doesn't want this, it's not her fault, but other people were talking about like all of the like, you know, he was grooming other people and, you know, basically sexually abusing all these other people in the cult and all that. And so like that is the interesting story here, and like the one that's like more horrific. But the
Mm.
cult focuses on these like two pretty white girls and like her like rich family that like is upset that she's not talking to them or whatever for most of this. And it's like this is like a very strong example of that, like, you know, white victim sort of thing where it's like, oh, we're more interested in like the pretty white girls than like the
Yes, of course.
actual like women of color who are
Yeah.
being, and men of color too, because there's a lot of black men involved in this as well, who are like coming out and talking about the horrible things that happened in that. It's like, why are we spending so much of this documentary
Of
talking about
course.
this girl who won't talk to her family when there's like people actually being like sexually abused and having their money stolen from them and things like that by this guy? Like, yeah, so it's an interesting doc. I just think, you know, as is Netflix, you know, the focus is all wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me in that instance that the audience doesn't need an avatar to tell that story through. You know what
Right.
I mean? If there's enough
Yeah,
fucking
exactly.
horrific stuff to it should be relevant to everybody without it needing,
Right.
you know, somebody
At least
to
you hope. Like, unfortunately,
mm,
probably not. They need to see white TikTokers that they follow the drama of on there to get them
yeah.
interested in this story. Um, but, you know, you want to think people would be upset by this and interested in this
Mm,
without having to
a
center.
surrogate. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that and I went and saw Babes, which is a horror movie because it's about pregnancy. And
Babes.
Babes, yeah, Ilana Glazer.
What a movie.
She, yeah, movie. She,
Why would
uh,
you go and see a movie like that?
well, I mean, I like Ilana Glazer, and there were no horror movies in the theater,
I
and
see. Okay.
so I was like, I want to go see a movie. So I went and saw Babes, and it is very funny. It drags a bit once the sort of like conflict hits 2/3 of the way through, but there were times I was laughing so hard that I was like snorting and crying, and I was very glad that I was the only person in the theater because
Nice.
it was
Do you know, I can't remember
so
the last time I
funny.
was paralyzed, like rendered immobile by laughter.
It's like one of those movies
I
that has
need that
like
in my life.
it's like the stupid moments, you know, like this is like
Sure.
one point where it's like a lot of Glazer's like really scared about like the amniocentesis needle going into her stomach, 'cause she keeps screaming every time like it's gonna go in there. And then her dad like comes in the room and joins her, and she's convinced them to put a gag in her mouth and blindfold him. And so they go to put the needle in, and you hear like blood curdling scream again, but then you realize it wasn't her, it was her dad. And
Okay, okay,
it's
good.
like the exact same tone, and it's so fucking dumb that I was just like rolling watching this. It's like I just love when something hits you with like just the
Sure.
stupidest thing you could possibly imagine.
You
Movie
know
full
it's
of
a
that.
zone that I love.
Yeah.
Just stupid enough.
Yeah, so it's a movie with a lot of great dumb moments in it. That's, you know, it's fun. So Babes, hey, check it out. If I can watch it and I don't like anything having to do with babies, um
Uteruses
yeah, don't want to know anything about what's going on in that
up there.
weird alien system happening there. So horrible.
Well,
It's one of those
I did
movies
the
that's like
episode on that.
it's one of those movies that's like validating on either end. Like if you're like a parent, like if you're a mom especially, but if you're a parent in general and like, you know, you're tired and exhausted and like feel
Yes,
like you want to
yes.
give up sometimes, this movie has like stuff in there for you. And if you're like me and you're like, fuck no, I do not want anything to do with this, validating for you too. It's got something for everybody.
Excellent.
There
You know, that might be what I need. I need to laugh.
you go. Yeah, it's a fun
Yes.
time.
Because am I wistful?
Hmm.
Is that why I've called tonight's kind of topic to mind? Is that why I'm on this fucking tip? Is that I'm wistful? I don't think I mentioned this last week, but a week or so ago, I was at a funeral. A good friend of mine, very, very good old friend of mine, from South Wales, very, very sadly died. Um, so I mean, and it kind of puts one in a very particular mindset at funerals,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It can't be denied. It puts one in a very particular mode way of thinking. And as I am often tended to do, my mind goes to the fucking fleeting nature of what this is, the transient, the fucking blink and you miss it, just this glimpse of life that we get.
Right.
And how to fucking extend it after you die, man. One thing
Hmm.
that my friend Mike was a deeply, deeply, deeply loved fella. He's completely unique. Once met, never forgotten, right?
Yeah.
And that was so evident in both the service and in, just chatting amongst friends like we did afterwards. But I often return. There's a saying that no doubt many will have heard. It's one that's commonly repeated on the internet, that there's that second death, isn't there? That when your name is no longer uttered, when your memory has fucking vanished,
Right.
when no one fucking, when you've just been kind of, your memory has been bred out almost through time and through
Hmm.
the natural order of life continuing. Right. Think what you will about Hitchens, right? Christopher Hitchens.
Sure.
Um, he's somebody who often pops into my TikToks, right? He's somebody who the algorithm have
People make
decided.
Christopher Hitchens TikToks.
Oh, are you fucking kidding me? He's atheist TikTok is huge.
Ugh.
You know, like Matt
That's
Dillahunty.
I don't think so. I try to stay away from the religious atheists. They're just all those new
Mm.
atheist people are just toxic. Don't want anything to do with it. If I can
There are a
avoid
couple of
knowing
them
they
who I enjoy,
exist, I
who I
don't
will
want
listen
any of
to.
them.
This one, the fella I just mentioned, the guy by the name of Matthew Dillahunty. He's got like an online call-in show,
Okay.
much like a kind of a atheist James O'Brien,
I don't know who that is.
uh, British political broadcaster on LBC,
Okay.
but who will he's his kind of stock and trade. His approach is when Tories ring his fucking show and complain about how Britain needs its rules back and needs its sovereignty back, and we'll benefit so much from this political move or that political move. He'll just quite simply ask, "But what law in particular are you looking forward to getting back then?" And things
Mm.
fall apart from there.
So,
And this
yeah.
guy Matt Dillahunty takes the same approach
Okay.
with theists in his atheism. He'll
Sure.
be very kind of forensic. All of which is to say, I saw Hitchens recently saying that, look, I'm cool with the idea that life ends and the party ends, right?
Mhm.
There's this fantastic party that we're all a part of, we're all invited to just by being alive, but that it ends. But that's not the case. The party carries on. The party doesn't end. You do. You have to
Right.
leave.
Hmm.
And that contextualizes it nicely for me. It's this idea that the party goes on when you've left the fucking room,
Right.
but without you. That's the fucking reality of it, isn't it?
Hmm.
And it got me wondering, how do you extend that time before your second death? How do you fucking push that window back before it happens? And
Hmm.
how can one leave impact? How can one leave? Who do you think has done it in our lifetime, Corey? Is there anyone who you can think of in our lives,
What was
in
the
whatever
question?
realm,
Uh-huh.
who can be said to have left not indelible so much, but a lasting fucking, who's changed things for the rest
Hmm.
of us?
I mean, it's an interesting question. I think it's okay. Let me back up a little bit here because
Mm,
I've said before on this show that I don't necessarily want to be remembered after I die. And when I said that, you were kind of like, like what? Like
mm,
that's weird. And I don't mean that like I want my friends to forget about me as soon as I die or whatever, but
yeah,
like I don't like the idea of a legacy doesn't necessarily feel like something that I need, like this like prevention of the second death kind of thing. And for me, I feel like it's because like there's kind of like two different ways of like being forgotten. And so like there's like the not being remembered because like you just made no difference, right? Like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
you were boring, or maybe you were
yeah, 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 yeah,
you were
yeah.
an asshole and everyone talked shit on you, and then once they died your
Yep.
memory was gone, or like any number of those kinds of
Willfully
things.
forgotten.
Right, like where it's just kind of like you were an insignificant blip on this. But I also think that like not being remembered can be because like you left nothing undone. Like I think there's something about being like present, right? Like being so in the moment and so
Mm.
present in your life that you don't think about your legacy. And
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
everything that you leave is in the present, is the way that your friends
Intentional.
and your family think about you and things like that. And you don't leave something that lasts because you were here, right? You weren't
Yes.
thinking about what was it, whether someone be saying your name 100 years from now or whatever.
That makes a lot of sense. Every moment spent worrying about it is time that you've spent not ensuring it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Like, so I think to an extent, there's like a part of me that looks at it that way. And then to like your sort of question here of like who has left those kinds of like who has left things that will stay, will prolong the repeating of their names or whatever. I feel like that's like not always a good thing. Like,
Mm.
you know, we'll probably be talking about Netanyahu for
Yeah.
centuries, right? like we talk about Hitler or things like that, like so I don't know, it's an interesting concept for me. I'm curious, like you do you want to extend that second death and why? That's my question to you.
Right. So
What does
yes,
this
I
mean
do.
to you? Okay.
Yes, I do hugely, but not so much for me. I mean,
Okay.
I wonder if I were to die tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
for how long would my kids remember me?
Right.
And what information sources would they be drawing from,
Right. Yeah.
as the fallibility of human memory took hold and over their teens and adulthood, all they have is memories of memories of memories. So what would be their kind of, what, like I said, what sources would they be drawing from, whose input
Mm.
would they have, and what would the picture of me look like 10-15 years from now if I were to die tomorrow?
Yeah, it's totally a good point. As someone with a dead dad, something that I
Mm, yeah.
absolutely get as well. Yeah.
uh
Um, Go ahead.
what goes into the, what sources have you drawn from in
Mhm.
forming the latent kind of image that you have of your dad?
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting question too, because to like what you were kind of also talking about there, like the fallibility of memory, right? I was
Yeah,
reading something, reading various articles before today or earlier today, and one of them was like basically saying that it was like, there is no such thing as like memory when it comes to a dead person. You basically reconstruct who they
of
were
course.
once they were dead from, largely like what you want to remember about a
Mm.
person or something like that. Like we rewrite the narrative once we lose someone and our brains are unreliable. I think that's a little bit of an overstatement. Like we do know that we can't trust memories, but I
Mm.
do think like, they're not um entirely unreliable. So like it had me thinking about like what do I remember of my dad? And I'm sure there are certainly things that I think of my dad that are like silver lined, you know,
Yes,
um,
yes, rose tinted.
rose tinted for sure. Like my mom's portrait of my dad is very different from mine, but I also think my mom is a really unreliable narrator.
Oh yeah,
So,
I've got that impression.
yeah,
Yes.
like what that's a thing we know about my mother. And I feel like there's a
Mm.
lot of things that she says now that I'm like, this feels new. This does not feel like
Yeah,
that's,
this is. Are
I've
you
never heard
retconning
any
me,
of this
mother?
before.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So I don't know. Like, I think when I think back on my dad, um, I tend to have like sort of his roles in my life, I guess. So like things like he was always at my like softball games.
Good,
He would be the third base coach at my softball
good.
games. He always liked for me to sit in his lap while they watched the evening news.
Love that.
He I would call him when we moved to California for help with my homework. I would go for walks with him around town and he would ask me questions, to try to get me like to be curious about the world and things like that. And so it's like things about like what role he played in my life
Yes.
that I usually think of when I think of the legacy of my dad. I think of, the tattoo on my arm of the place where, that was his favorite spot and where he liked to go and sit and talk about nature and about, history and things like that. Things of that nature. That's what lingers on for me. My sister doesn't have like a ton of like memories when it
Okay.
comes to my dad. For her, like my evil stepfather was more like her
Okay.
dad than than our dad was. He was, just by proximity or whatever, not for any reason other than when we moved, she was young.
Uh,
But so she has like a much more limited amount of things to pull from, having been younger when we moved away from him.
mm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, which would just, kind of underline my point, underscore my point. The same fella has probably got a very, very different,
Hmm.
lasting kind of ingram
Right.
in you and your sister's memories.
Yeah, definitely. And my brothers who are, much older,
Mm.
my oldest brother is 54. So his memories of my dad, and, the fraught relationship that they had is going to be a lot different than my
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
33, 34-year-old sister.
Yeah.
Things like that. Um, yeah, it's an interesting
What occurs to
thought.
me is that not everyone is in the same position as I am, in that not everybody has, coming up to 5 years of weekly recorded conversations,
Right.
surviving them.
Hmm.
So I think what we do here is interesting for me on that score as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be kind of an interesting thought that, like, say you were to die tomorrow,
Could happen.
and your kids wanted
JoAG rule
to,
number one: you're not safe.
exactly, and your kids wanted to sort of reconstruct an idea of like who was my dad. Um,
Yeah.
they have 4 years of this document that, and here's the interesting thing about memory too. I was thinking about this, and you sort of alluded to this as well, is that eventually things become memories of memories of memories, right? Like if we look at like a historical figure, um let's say F. Scott Fitzgerald,
All
the
right.
author of The Great Gatsby, right? Nobody, well, maybe some, no, too long ago, nobody remembers F. Scott Fitzgerald. No one was friends with F. Scott Fitzgerald. His kid is dead.
Mm.
There's nobody alive.
Primary sources left.
Right. No primary sources about F. Scott Fitzgerald left. We can read what other people wrote. We can read what Zelda thought of him. We can read what Hemingway thought of him, but their memories too. Their memories of memories as well. And so there's nothing left of these people. They're reconstructions, right? Like
Mm.
there's that those people, for all intents and purposes, like they are not memories. They are something else
Of
entirely
course.
at this point. Nobody remembers them. And there's this degree to which we then,
Composites, just
yeah, right?
strands pulled
Yes,
together,
strands of
woven.
people, and then we'll reconstruct them, right? Like take the Woody Allen movie Midnight in Paris, right, where you see all of those people frolicking around in Paris in the early 20th century and all of that kind of stuff. Like, so we can rebuild them as some idea based on
Yeah, 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 yeah,
recollections
yeah.
of recollections that we have of people. And what's fascinating about that concept is that, like, say your kids were listening to this as a document of you, that reconstruction eventually would replace you.
Yes. Yes.
They don't know this guy necessarily, right? Like the deep inside of who you
No.
are, what you cry about, what you struggle with, all these kinds of things that we have discussed over the past 4 years. And so they might know you better, but it wouldn't be a memory, which is interesting.
I'm certain we could train a very good chatbot to do a
Right.
facsimile of both you or I
At
uh,
this point, absolutely.
by plugging JoAG into it.
Yes. Nobody do that. I do not give consent, but
Oh, certain, don't you fucking dare.
don't you fucking dare do that. But you absolutely could. Like there's so
Yeah.
much in here at this point. Um, but I think that says something again to this sort of like idea of prolonging that or whatever. Like there could be people listening to this in 100 years who have a very good idea of who we are, but it's not a memory, you know?
Mm.
It's always going to be someone trying to contextualize us talking about ourselves and talking around the world around us.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Look, I'm generally super comfortable with this the fleeting
Mhm.
nature of stuff. We've talked about it endlessly over the past few years. Um, but there's nothing like a funeral for bringing that home. There's nothing
Yeah,
like a
absolutely.
funeral for, you know, just spelling it out to you that
Yeah, what are you leaving and what does that
yeah,
mean?
there's only going to be a finite amount of time that that your name is in people's
Right.
mouths.
It's I have this like, to the point that, I was talking about how thinking about this in terms of now like my dog dying. Like
Yeah, sure.
as much as I'm sitting here like, oh, like I don't really care about my legacy. I have this weird thing about like the fact that like once we die or sell this house or whatever, the next people won't keep the things memorializing the dog. And there's like a
And
big
that's it.
rock.
That's his second death.
Yeah. Like there's a big rock that we're gonna bury him by. And we're putting like his engraved bowl out there for like the birds to drink from and the animals to come and drink from.
That's nice.
But yeah, someday someone else will live here and maybe they won't want that rock there anymore. Maybe they want to put in a garage, and they'll dig all of that up and Gaucho's bones go into a dumpster and all of these kinds of things.
Oh
And
no.
like I find that
No.
right, I find that somehow more unthinkable than people forgetting about me. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
no one's gonna remember, maybe because like I don't know, maybe it's because it's an animal that it's like they just provide so much for us and like get nothing out of the deal or whatever, that I'm like people should remember this little
Yes.
guy who served me all this time, and like me, meh, whatever.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe I'm becoming trite in my old age, but I do find myself kind of falling back on hey little sayings more and more often. And it's true
Mm.
for pets. I mean, you've only known Gaucho for a bit of your life, whereas you've
Yeah.
been all of his.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Or at least most of 16 of the 17 years he
Yeah.
has been with me. But
That's
like,
the oldest dog I've ever fucking heard of in my life.
there are people with older, man. Some dogs live a really long time, but not usually. They don't. And we've thought he was going to die at
Yeah,
so many times throughout his
yeah,
life.
yeah.
It's truly incredible that he's a 17-year-old dog when he has had multiple health scares and things like that. But I mean, it sounds
Yeah.
like super trite and everything to compare this to like, your friend dying or my dad dying or things like that. But somehow this
Mm,
animal that I have been raising for the
mm.
past 16 years um raises this question for me in a way that like when I think about myself, I'm not
Yes.
as like bothered by it.
Well, you've got options with Gouge, right?
Sure.
Uh, I think we've spoken about these guys before, right? But there are tribes. There is a particular tribe called the Agoris. Um, they're a Hindu sect in India,
Okay.
and they're big into endo-cannibalism of the dead.
Endo cannibalism.
Endo-cannibalism
Okay.
specifically, which differs from just atypical cannibalism in that endo-cannibalism refers to consumption of those within your own community, possibly your own family.
Sure. Yeah.
Cannibalism of those if from a similar
Yeah,
kind of section.
this came up when Joe Biden said that weird bullshit story about how like his uncle got eaten by cannibals in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
it was like the people from there were like, we wouldn't just eat like some fucking random white guy who fell out of the sky. Like, this is like
yeah.
the reason we ate people was like they were members of our own community. And it was usually like, to honor them, not
Yes.
because it wasn't violent. It wasn't just because we like were starving. There was a
Mm.
reason that we ate the people that we did.
Yeah, and the Agori are. exactly why they want to kind of bring the spirit, the
Hmm.
intellect, the essence of their loved one back into their tribe, into their people. The Agori are fucking fascinating, right? They are the most hardcore fucking death sodden motherfuckers. They will kind of live in cemeteries. They will kind of
Mm.
meditate sat on corpses. They'll fucking eat the dead. They'll fucking use skulls and shit, ashes and cremation materials as makeup. They're just this
Dang.
fucking soaked in death tribe. And you know, they'll keep their lost loved ones close through just chowing the fuck on down. So I'm just
Yeah,
saying, with Gaucho, you've got options.
could always do that. There's not much meat left on that dog. It would not be
No, that's
a very
also
good
true. Yeah,
meal.
that's yeah.
But I mean,
He's
it's like
nothing but a
kind of,
nugget.
yeah. Obviously, though, it's like that's extreme, but it's like an extreme version of things that we do as well. We both have tattoos for family members who,
Yeah, we do.
have
We do.
died on us. Like we find ways to sort of internalize people. People get jewelry made out of people's ashes.
It's true.
People have gotten, you can get tattoos with people's ashes, the ink
You
being made
can.
from
Yes, you
people's
can.
ashes. So,
Mm.
it sounds like, whoa, they like, they want to like eat and get this person like inside of them or whatever. But we
But what is it
absolutely
if
do
not?
that
Yeah, it's the same, isn't
too.
it? It's the same instinct.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. We
And
may not sit on a corpse, but we will go to a cemetery and, stand on
exactly,
them.
exactly. And getting a fucking tattoo isn't going to give you folding prion diseases. It
Well,
isn't going to give you
that's a
fucking,
valid
you
point.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? It isn't going to give you prion
Touche.
disorders, which are going to fuck you up, which is a problem that the Agori sect have.
Do they really?
Oh fuck yeah, they suffer badly with something called kuru, um,
Okay.
which is a prion disease, much like Creutzfeldt-Jakob.
Hmm.
They aren't the only tribe. The four people, a tribe from Papua New Guinea, again big into endocannibalism, riddled with kuru. Interestingly, right? Interestingly, because kuru is a an infection which centers in kind of brain matter, cranial matter, in the Foray tribe or the Four tribe, however it's pronounced, the kuru, the prion disease, was more prevalent in women, as they're
Hmm.
the ones who would eat the skull and brain, whereas the men would feast on kind of muscle tissue and uh,
Interesting.
yeah. So it was the women who were getting the prions,
That's wild.
isn't it?
Fascinating. Okay, so we're
And
not
what's
going
the
to do
point? Yeah,
that.
we're not gonna no, don't do
What
that. Don't
else? What else we
please.
got? What else do people do to
Um,
stave off the second death?
Well, there's a practice again Papua New Guinea tribes, women from the Dani tribe, in a kind of the opposite way to what we're saying here, to get rid of somebody's energy. If there's a wrong one, if there's a
Okay.
wrong one who's died and they just want to get the fuck rid of them, they will amputate. They will amputate a finger
Oh,
as a memorial to a deceased loved one. So in terms of ritual, you would put the essence of that person, whatever bad memories, whatever fucking you know, bad kind of associations they conjure up, lock it in that finger, cut it the fuck off, get rid of the dude, burn it to ashes, store it in a special place in a lockbox.
mm,
But yes, you can cut it out,
interesting. Okay.
isn't it?
That's kind of an interesting one because I was reading something about, I think it's the Romans and this sort of idea of basically like erasing the
Yeah, yeah,
memory.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I can't remember what the phrase was, but it had a really good phrase behind it as well, like condemning the memory or something like that.
Nice.
And basically the idea behind that was like if someone was a shithead or whatever, you would like actively like basically the ancient Roman equivalent of scratching them out of the family photo, right? Like there's
Oh
like
yeah,
these little
nice.
pendants and stuff, and it'll be like, here's the mom, and here's the
Like
brother,
Stalin used to
and
do.
here's just scratched out this. Well, Stalin was an example that was brought up in an article that I read because like Ukraine got rid of like all Stalin statues, or no, it was
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Lenin,
yeah,
not
yeah.
Stalin, Lenin
There you go.
statues.
Yes, of course.
um but to like basically just sort of try to like distance themselves from their Soviet past and things like that. And we here, especially like in 2020 when sort of the Black Lives Matter was really prevalent and things like that, there was the like pulling down of a lot of Confederate statues and changing the
Yeah.
names of like places that were named after
Happened
famous
in
slave
pockets over
holder.
here too.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. There's plenty of those kinds of things. I think one of your guys like went into a lake at
He
one
did.
point. Yeah.
Colston in Bristol. Yes.
Yes, in Bristol. That's right. Um, and so, but the sort of idea behind that being like that you're condemning the memory, right? You're trying to like sort of
Sure.
cut out that thing because and cause that in a sense sort of a second death. But also one of the things that one of the articles was talking about was that often like that spectacle of scratching someone out of a photo, tearing down their statue or things like that does keep the memory alive, but it serves to
It
like your pinky
reclaims
or
it,
like
doesn't it?
your whatever, your pointer finger, whatever it was that you said
Mm.
for your tribe here, it's like you're condemning it. You're like
Reframing it.
reframing what
Mm.
that is. So that like whatever legacy that person has, it's a foul one. It's one that
Yes.
we shouldn't idolize or things like that.
Yes.
And you see in like the pushback from people who don't want us to take down Confederate statues and things like that, like, they understand that by pulling down a statue of Robert E. Lee, you're inherently condemning the Confederacy. You're condemning a belief that they have in taking this down, and saying like this person is not worthy. You are killing that cause for a second
Mm.
time. And so yeah, it's interesting to see multiple cultures have like some sort of thing like that where it's like it's not simply that their name leaves your mouth because it may be there forever, but that you have put something
The right
upon it.
context for it. Yes.
You've contextualized it. Yeah.
I will be thinking closely about ways in which to stave off my second death.
Hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
can't promise.
What if you're like 95, lived out like a full life, all right? We're not talking early death because like obviously I've got FOMO. I don't want to die tomorrow or
Exactly.
anything like that, right? Like
Mm.
but like if I live a full life, it's between like my molecular dust and the universe or whatever what happens beyond that. So what if you live to a ripe old age, your family has had beautiful memories and all that kind of stuff with you?
Well,
What
yeah,
then?
then maybe I wouldn't bother. I mean, if you're going to stage manage it properly, you need a few things to be in place, don't you? You need advance warning for a start. You need to know when it's going to fucking happen.
Sure.
Uh, which we don't.
We don't know. But I mean, a lot of people, they work on that legacy beforehand. If you've
Mm.
ever seen Hamilton, that whole thing about planting, sowing seeds in a garden you never get to see, right?
Yes,
Knowing
yes,
that you're making something that you're not going to see the results of, but
yes.
um nonetheless, someday in the future, rich people who name shit after themselves or create endowments for after they die, things like
Legacies,
that.
yeah, sure.
Legacies,
Foundations.
there's things that people do to, whenever they kick the
Mm.
bucket, they leave
You've got
something.
fucking Matey Boy with the tiles, the Kubrick fucking
Yeah,
tiles.
right.
What
Toynbee
is that?
tiles, right.
Yes, exactly.
Which we have, I don't know if we revisited that, but oh yeah, I think I did mention that there's a documentary that does
Oh,
reveal who he is. Yeah, but
yes, but don't watch it. Let's just let the guy.
just let it be. Um, but yeah, so theoretically you have the option, but do you care if you've lived a whole life? Are you concerned
That's
with
the
staving
question,
off
isn't
the
it? Yeah,
second
yeah, yeah.
death?
If in your, your scenario, if I'm in my 90s, a life well lived, uh, achievement and a family to be proud of, who gives a shit?
Right.
But it's in cases where it's man, isn't it fucking brilliantly infuriating that you can kick back all you fucking want, but it makes no difference. It is inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love it.
It's a weird thought, but it's one that, of all things, like I think I don't know, it's a thing that I think my life over the course of my life I've changed my ideas about. And yeah, that idea of not needing, like, I went and we were cleaning out like my mom's storage unit or whatever, and there's like tons of like my old journals and stuff like
Mm.
that in it. And like
Nice.
for I always used to like keep all of that kind of stuff and everything, and things going back forever. And I like pulled them out of there, checked to make sure nothing important was inside any of them, and then it was like whatever, 15-year-old Corrigan had to say is none of my
Yes.
business, and tossed all of that stuff in the dumpster. Like there's just no sense to me that there has to be something for people later to find. And to be fair, also this comes from like not having kids. I don't have to worry about
Yeah,
what
yeah, yeah.
legacy I leave behind with my children or anything like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's just one of those things that over time I've come to realize like I want to be present. Um, and I hope like as far as I think in terms of legacy is that I hope that people who encounter me are better for having encountered me. That's all I
Yes,
want.
I completely agree. Leave the room fucking better than it was when you got here. That's
Right, exactly.
if I
That's all
can't
I
do that,
want.
Jesus
How
Christ.
long that
Yeah,
lasts doesn't matter, but I
yeah,
want
yeah.
that to be the case.
Okay. Just thoughts, no answers, no
No,
solutions, no
never.
fucking tidy outcomes. Just fucking thoughts and questions as they occur, friends, as you come with us on this journey through uncertainty and filth.
What do you think, though? Let us know. Are you
Mm.
concerned about your legacy? Do you not give a shit? Would you risk a prion disease to eat your favorite relative?
Have you eaten a relative? How
Have
did
you
they
eaten
taste?
a relative? Whatever. How do you memorialize people and pets? And how do you want to be memorialized? Tell us all about it. We're
Hmm.
curious. We know
We're all
our
ears.
mindsets are not always the mainstream ones.
Nah.
We
And while you're doing all that, listen, thanks as always for coming along with us because we love you deeply and we
do.
want you to stay spooky.
Very much so.